Welcome. Today I will be playing the part of your presenter. With that said, I would like to introduce you to Erving Goffman, Philip Markoff, this Craigslist killer, and dramaturgical analysis. Erving Goffman may not have known it then, but his childhood may have paved the way for his psychological success. As a poor shy kid growing up in Toronto, Goffman spent much time observing the people around him and how their personalities changed from one situation to the next. He once described a situation in which he would frequent an establishment, a bar, being too poor to drink and too shy to interact. He would stand idly by as men and women would engage. Here is where he noticed the change of presentation in men when they would move from the bar to the company of a woman. Seen by some as an anti-psychiatric or socialist of emotions, Goffman's work was not always considered worthy of psychology. Others view his work as a contribution to psychology. One contribution would be dramaturgical analysis theory. This theory suggests that personalities are displayed in learned and habitual performances. They do not exist as such in individuals, but in the way individuals are perceived by others, and in some cases how an actor perceives him or herself. What this means is that different situations or events in one's life may warrant a different actor or personality. People are self-aware of situations in which they need to shift gears from fun, obnoxious partier to, say, a button-down, no-nonsense businessman. Some situations can be subtler. For example, acting mature and parental to a child and then gossiping with a friend over the phone later. Goffman compares dramaturgical analysis to a play, in which each play has actors. These actors have two different personalities, one on stage and one behind the curtain. He applies his comparisons to people and how they present themselves differently in some situations, while also managing their personalities deliberately in others. Philip Markoff, also known as the Craigslist killer, would use Craigslist.com to find his victims. He would reach out to these women seeking sex, lap dances, and sensual massage. His intentions seemed to be rob them, and in one case murdered a girl who fought back. He made very little effort to hide his identity to his victims and security cameras. He made no attempt to clean up evidence, leaving behind his fingerprints as well. He took the women's panties as trophies, hid them in the home he shared with his fiancée, as well as the gun he used in his attacks. He was captured by police and went to jail, where he committed suicide, making it impossible for family and friends of his victims to find closure. So how does dramaturgical theory apply to the Craigslist killer? Well, by applying this theory to Philip Markoff, who was also dubbed the Craigslist killer, we may hope to find the actor on stage and the man behind the curtain. So who was the actor? Those close to Philip Markoff knew him as a loving fiancé and an educated second-year med student at Boston University. He had a bright future ahead of him. One friend of Philip described him as a dork, and added she too was a dork, as if to describe a light-hearted, quirky side of Philip that was comparable to her own personality. The rest of the world came to know him as the Craigslist killer. One of his victims described him as dumb and more than a little bit weird. After he failed to mask himself while tying her up and robbing her before stealing her panties. Which begs the question, who was Philip Markoff? His blonde hair and good looks, coupled with his education and background, painted a picture of the perfect boy next door. Yet his crimes repainted the picture of a depraved murderer, thief, and pervert. Some could argue that Philip really was the young man his family loved and cared about, and one day he just snapped and went on a spree. Others might argue that the killer inside him was lying dormant due to lack of opportunity or courage to carry out his acts. Applying dramaturgical theory to this man, how do we decide who is the actor and who is the character? One personality must be his actual self, and the other a deliberate self-presentation. In the current case study of Philip Markoff, very little is told about Philip Markoff the man, other than his good looks, his love for his fiancée, and how smart he was. One peer of his described a situation when she and Philip were drinking together, and he forcefully kissed her against her will, and did not stop his attack until another male peer interrupted and pulled Markoff off her. She added that she thought it was just the alcohol causing him to act that way. Or might we assume that the alcohol clouded his judgment, or gave him the liquid courage to reveal his true character, like a wardrobe malfunction during a play? In the same case study, when describing Philip as the Craigslist killers, his victims never mentioned a slip in character. He never accidentally switched roles back into Philip Markoff, the kind-hearted, caring, and smart young man his family described. Using dramaturgical analysis, one could conclude that it is possible the killer within Philip Markoff may have been his true nature. Yet societal views and pressures urged him to put on the performance of a bright, handsome young man who loved and cared for everyone around him. A great deal of people play the role of the perfect citizen daily, masking any abnormalities that society may not deem acceptable, and only show their true personalities to people who they trust and people who accept them for them. However, in Philip's case, people who find robbery, murder, and perversion acceptable are very few and far between, or at least hide that side of them very well. Philip spent most of his life in character, and unable to keep the act up any longer, he broke character, and fulfilled himself by being himself.